Just a reminder, Doctor, you're still under oath.
Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here with us today. Just a few questions for you. Shouldn't take too long. Just to confirm, you're not a pathologist yourself, correct?
I'm a cardiologist.
The vast majority of the patients that you treat are in a clinical setting, correct?
Correct.
Meaning they're alive generally when they see you?
Yeah.
All right. Can we agree that it is a pretty common occurrence that people die who have arteries that are 90% blocked?
No, sir. Well, everyone dies eventually, but not from the 90% blockage.
People die every day who have a 90% blockage.
People die every day from heart attacks.
Well, there's a difference between a heart attack and heart failure, right?
Heart attack and heart failure, you are correct, are completely different terms.
Okay. So people who have a 90% blockage may have a cardiac event and may die.
As a hypothetical,
Yes.
hypothetically, there are undoubtedly people who have died from coronary events with 90% blockages or without blockages.
Okay. And people may not experience pain, right, as a result of an arrhythmia?
Correct.
And sometimes people have a 90% blockage of the right coronary artery and a 75% blockage of the left anterior descending artery, and they die, right?
Again, this is a not this case we're talking about.
Exactly, hypothetically.
In a hypothetical case, somebody who has any extent of coronary disease, including the descriptions that you just gave, could potentially die. Sure.
And again, they may have no pain associated with a fatal arrhythmia, right?
Fatal arrhythmias often are not associated with pain, in fact.
You would agree that Mr. Floyd did have coronary artery disease.
Absolutely.
And how is that normally, in a living person, how is that normally diagnosed?
So usually the patient has symptoms. So they will have chest pain or they're exercising, right? If you're an active person, you shouldn't have chest pain. And if you come to the doctor and say, something's not right, every time I try to exert myself or boy, it feels like the elephant on the chest is the classic description. So that would be one of many possible ways that you would diagnose coronary artery disease in someone who is alive.
May also do a stress test.
Sometimes.
A blocked right coronary artery that can contribute to a fatal arrhythmia.
Anyone can have a fatal arrhythmia with or without coronary artery disease.
And so if a blood vessel is blocked and blood is not getting through that vessel, what happens?
Well, it depends, but I'd like to answer that for you. So in the case of Mr. Floyd, what has most likely happened, based on our understanding of coronary physiology, is precisely because he had a narrowing of up to 90% and it had calcium in it. We know that that developed gradually. And the heart is fascinating in what it does. It develops what's called coronary collaterals, which means the body makes additional blood vessels so that if there's one artery that's narrow, it recruits and builds many more blood vessels to supply blood to the heart. It's actually why you are more likely to die from a heart attack if you started with a lesser narrowed artery and the plaque ruptured and blocked the vessel than if you started with a more severe narrowing because of all these unbelievable coronary collaterals and adaptive responses that the heart does when that happens.
What is a safe dose of methamphetamine?
Prescribed?
Illicit.
I would never consider any illicit drug to be off the street that's not prescribed by a physician to be safe.
And methamphetamine is a vasoconstrictor, correct?
It often can act as a vasoconstrictor.
That means it constricts the blood vessels more, correct?
Yeah, correct. That's what vasoconstriction means. Narrows them down more.
You understand, based on the medical records, that there's prior evidence of methamphetamine use by Mr. Floyd?
Yes, sir.
And methamphetamine can cause some changes to the heart in and of itself, correct?
Correct.
In fact, it sort of ages the heart more, right?
I've never used that terminology.
Okay. What does it do to the heart over prolonged use?
Every case is different, and it depends what we mean by prolonged use. So 1 day, 1 week, 25 years. Like most things, if you smoke cigarettes for 50 years, you're going to have more problems than if you smoked a cigarette or a pack every once in a while.
In terms of what does methamphetamine do to the heart itself?
So methamphetamine, if used over a long period of time, can sometimes contribute to the development of coronary artery disease, as we've been discussing. It can constrict blood vessels, as you mentioned. It can have kind of a host of different effects on various parts of the body, including the heart.
And there's lots of things that can make the heart work harder and faster, right?
Sure.
I mean, methamphetamine being one of them,
Yes.
vigorous activity being one of them,
Sure.
adrenaline.
Yeah, I mean, we all right now have a lot of adrenaline flowing through our system. Adrenaline is needed for life, for sure.
Increases in adrenaline can cause the heart to work harder and faster.
Yeah, I mean, so adrenaline, which is the lay term for catecholamines, that's the purpose of adrenaline, is to get it to pump more blood. When we go and exercise, the purpose of adrenaline is so we can run and we can jump, and we ask the heart to allow us to do that, correct?
And have you in your practice worked with someone who has a paraganglioma?
I have had a couple of patients who've had what we call Pheochromocytomas, which is a type of paraganglioma, yes.
In the hip area generally?
No, generally it's actually near the adrenal gland, which is sort of just near the kidneys. But these paragangliomas can sometimes pop up in different places.
And how are they typically identified?
Well, so it depends. If it was clinically pertinent, that's how I diagnosed the ones that I've had. The classic findings are the person who's saying, I'm always having headaches. What is with these headaches? I'm always sweating. Why am I always sweating? And you start to say, I wonder if something is releasing a hormone that can be contributing to that. Other times, like in my opinion, the case here with Mr. Floyd, you'll pick them up incidentally, say at an autopsy.
They're also often identified because it contributes to high blood pressure.
It can, that is right.
You have agreed that you've reviewed the medical records of Mr. Floyd, correct?
Correct.
And he has a pretty significant history of extremely elevated blood pressures, right?
Yes.
I think the one you referenced, that the top number was over 200.
Yeah, on more than one occasion.
On more than one occasion. And the lower number of the blood pressure was likewise elevated, right?
Yes.
Did you observe evidence that in the medical records that Mr. Floyd was taking prescribed medications to control his blood pressure?
I saw in the records during an emergency room visit that he was prescribed high blood pressure medication. What I could not see is whether he was taking them or not, but it did look like at one point there was a prescription given to him. I think one of them was for amlodipine, which is a calcium channel blocker, and one of them was for I think, either hydrochlorothiazide or chlorthalidone.
And you'd agree that the records that you had for Mr. Floyd were relatively limited, agreed? I mean, they weren't his entire life medical records.
I don't know when he started to see medical professionals. So for all I know, the first instance in the records that I saw was the first time he started to see medical professionals. I'm not sure.
So how many years of past medical records did you review?
I believe 3 or so. I think the beginning of 2018 is when I think they started.
Are paragangliomas ever removed from a person?
Paragangliomas, if they are causing those symptoms that I mentioned, the pulsatile headaches, the sweating, etc., a surgeon would sometimes remove them.
Would you prescribe an amphetamine for somebody who has a 90% blockage of the right coronary artery and a 75% blockage of the left anterior descending artery?
So first of all, I don't typically prescribe amphetamines. I have many patients who have coronary artery disease that are on stimulants, okay, for a variety of medical conditions. So I just don't prescribe them, but I do have many patients with coronary disease who are on stimulants.
Would you recommend to someone that they use methamphetamines with that degree of coronary artery disease?
I would never recommend that anybody take methamphetamine off the street for any reason.
Are you aware of the research showing that deaths where both methamphetamine and fentanyl are found, it occurs at a much higher incidence?
Can you repeat that question, please?
Sure. Are you aware that the research has demonstrated that deaths of those who use methamphetamine and fentanyl have been notably higher than meth or fentanyl alone? The combination.
Objection, Your Honor, for lack of foundation, assuming facts.
As to assuming facts, that is overruled. Is it the scope of his foundation? Since the state did ask him for toxicology opinions.
Sure, but the reference to medical articles, none of which anyone has seen, is simply counsel's reference, Your Honor.
Overruled. You may answer if you know.
Okay. I am not familiar with the breadth of the literature looking at all of the different combination of drugs and which combination worsens or improves survival.
You testified that Mr. Floyd, based on your review of the video, did start complaining of shortness of breath prior to being placed in the prone position, right?
Yes, I heard on more than one occasion he say the words, "I can't breathe."
And if Mr. Floyd had simply gotten in the back seat of the squad car, do you think that he would have survived?
Objection, Your Honor. It's not calling for medical testimony.
You may give it if you have a medical opinion as to that. Overruled to that extent.
So, had he not been restrained in the way in which he was, I think he would have survived that day. I think he would have gone home or wherever he was going to go had he not been subjected to the prone and positional restraint that he was.
So in other words, if he had gotten in the squad car, he'd be alive.
I think my answer remains the same. Anything other than that scenario that he was subjected to, I have no reason to think from a medical perspective that he would not have survived that day, correct?
And in terms of the prone position, you would agree that the prone position is not in and of itself inherently dangerous?
In an ordinary individual, if we were to take away everything else that was going on and someone was just simply lying in the prone position, while there are many patients who that would be inherently dangerous, the average individual, I would agree with you, probably just lying flat in that situation generally wouldn't be dangerous.
Even in the ICU, there are circumstances where people have serious medical conditions where they're maintained in the prone position. Agreed?
In the ICU, When patients are put into the prone position, it is when it is a desperate attempt to save someone's life where their lungs have actually developed what we call acute respiratory distress syndrome, or ARDS. They have a ventilator in to make sure that the amount of air that they get, no matter their positioning, will always be enough. And so it's a funny thing to think about putting someone in the prone positioning in the ICU on a respirator, but because of respiratory physiology, sometimes that will actually help open up certain segments of the lungs that are needed for oxygenation. But it's really important to keep in mind that they are on a respirator every single time to open up those lung airways, and they're usually on sedation as well to keep them comfortable.
And my last question, doctor, is after someone's heart stops, is it possible that they continue to respire?
It is, well, I'm not sure I could answer that with certainty other than to say there are these things that are called agonal breaths. So when I'm in the intensive care unit with a patient who is dying and they go into cardiac arrest, once in a while you will see them take 1 or 2 extra breaths. I'm not sure the exact mechanism or the physiologic trigger for that. So you could potentially see some extra breaths for a short period of time.
By a short period of time, up to a minute?
In my experience, if the heart has completely stopped, I would not expect to see the breathing continue for up to a minute, but I might expect it to be seen for several seconds.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Dr. Rich, you were asked several questions that had to do, or at least had as a premise, the blockage of Mr. Floyd's arteries. Is blockage a proper medical term to you as a cardiologist to describe the narrowing in Mr. Floyd's arteries?
So when we try to use terminology that is not medical terminology, right, to explain these phenomena, the term blockage I tend to use when the blood vessel is completely blocked. There's a blockage. I will usually describe, if I have a patient like Mr. Floyd who has coronary artery disease like this, I will usually use the term narrowings because the blood is still getting through. In fact, the blood may be getting through just fine. There is no level of narrowing, in fact. Even a totally blocked artery, this is what's fascinating, that develops over time, the territory of blood that blood vessel was supposed to supply can still be getting enough blood because of those collateral vessels that develop. So I would use the term with Mr. Floyd as narrowings.
You were asked questions again about paragangliomas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you told us that those are usually preceded by headaches of some kind.
Classically correct.
One of the symptoms is headaches.
Yes, that is right.
Again, did you hear amongst the various complaints Mr. Floyd may have had about pain, did you hear any of them being a headache?
No. In fact, when I saw that there was a paraganglioma described as an incidental finding in the autopsy report, I actually, when I went to the medical records, I used that Control F button to put in headache and make sure that I never found headache, in addition to scrolling through all of the records. I didn't find headaches at any point.
When you referenced paraganglioma being an incidental finding on the autopsy, would you tell the jury what's meant by incidental?
Sure. So all of us have things in our bodies that aren't causing any medical problems. But if they're discovered, let's say someone gets a CAT scan for one reason, they might find that there's a cyst on the kidney or the liver. Sometimes we'll even pick up benign tumors. So we refer to those as incidental findings. In fact, in the case of paraganglioma, The name we would actually call it is an incidentaloma, because we don't think it has clinical relevance, but it was found and described in the imaging, or in this case, the autopsy.
Are you familiar with any of the data as to how many people in the United States have ever died as a paraganglioma as the principal or primary reason for death?
To be honest, I don't know the exact numbers. I just know that they are very low.
Now, you were asked questions about high blood pressure, the role and impact of methamphetamine, paraganglioma, narrowing arteries. Can any of those things in, of, and by themselves cause someone to die without first injuring the heart?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, what I'm trying to get at, whether we talk about high blood pressure, methamphetamine, paraganglioma, and the impact on the adrenals, narrowing of the arteries, can any of those things by themselves cause a person to die without first impacting the stoppage of the heart?
Well, the reason I asked you to ask the question again is because I want to make sure that I'm precise and clear here. High blood pressure can cause death in manners outside of the heart. For example, it can contribute to a stroke, which we know Mr. Floyd didn't have. And the other thing that can occasionally happen is this thing called an aortic dissection, where the aorta, the main tube that leads the heart, can tear. That can cause death. So I want to make absolutely clear, these conditions can cause death on occasion in areas not involving the heart, but most of the time, if death is going to occur by them, it's going to be caused because of their impact on the heart.
And did Mr. Floyd have an aortic dissection?
No, he absolutely did not, based on the review of the autopsy.
And didn't have a stroke?
He also did not have a stroke.
So again, just to be clear for the jury, with all the discussion about the narrowing of arteries, meth, etc., was there any damage at all observed to Mr. Floyd's heart muscle?
Based on my review of all of the evidence, the EKGs, the autopsy report, I found absolutely no evidence at all of heart damage in Mr. Floyd's heart.
Thank you, Dr. Rich.
Any recross?
On redirect, you were asked a question about the paraganglioma, the coronary heart disease, high blood pressure, if any one of those can cause death independently, and you answered relevant to the high blood pressure, right? But you would agree that when you combine a lot of factors, you would agree that the body is, a lot of things are happening at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And in combination, if you have a paraganglioma, you've got an increase in the fight or flight kind of response. You've got coronary heart disease, you've got high blood pressure. All of those things combined could cause death, even if there was not a physical restraint.
Well, there's his paraganglioma. The likelihood that his paraganglioma was even releasing any hormone is highly unlikely.
But in terms of the combination, the drugs, the high blood pressure, take the paraganglioma out of it, right? The increase in adrenaline from a struggle with officers. All of those things combined together, even in the absence of prone restraint, could have resulted in death. Yes or no, sir?
Upon my review of the evidence and the facts of the case, I found no evidence to support that.
Fair enough. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, doctor.
Thank you.
You are excused.
Thank you.
And we have our next witnesses at 1:30, is that correct? All right, we have two witnesses for this afternoon, members of the jury, and counsel and I have to finish up some legal issues at 1, so we're going to break until 1:30. Have a good lunch.